So if you saw the TV series The Deadliest Catch, this is actually the port that a lot of them leave from. It was made for TV, but oftentimes you see the ships docked here in Ketchikan as well. In fact, there's a tour on one of these actual ships that will take you kind of to give you an idea of what that filming was like, The Deadliest Catch. So there's a lot of things to do with Ketchikan. So definitely I would recommend getting off the ship. The weather is what it is, but I would definitely get off. It is the last Alaskan port. Tomorrow, of course, will be a day at sea. Ketchikan is a great walking port, so when you get off the ship, everything is right there. And all the shops and restaurants and different things you can enjoy. Of course, you want to go into the shops and buy as much souvenir as possible. They depend on cruise ships. Alaska's visitors season runs from May through the first week of October. That's when most of the tourism dollars are created. And so tourism is a big part of their economy, so they do want you to come and do some shopping and leave every single dollar you brought with you. Yeah. Okay, so the question I had, the suggestion I had was trivia, and the question was, what state has the most volcanoes? I wouldn't say we have the most active volcanoes. Yeah. Oregon, yes, the answer was Oregon. Yeah. So keep your eyes peeled for wildlife. You never know what you see on the shoreline. Right now the tide is low, so the Tlingit people say when the tide is low, the table is set. That means an opportunity for bears. Yeah. Never know. They appear almost anywhere. So they come to the shoreline when the tide is low to look for whatever on the beaches. Of course, they do go into a hibernation situation in Alaska. They don't go into a deep sleep like they would further north. But when they do get up, one of the first things they do is they come out to eat. Well, the first thing they do is they eat grass. And eating grass, of course, allows them to get their bowel system moving once again. And after that, of course, it's about eating. And they come to the shoreline in search of things that are left behind after the tide recedes. So anything from cockles to clams, whatever they can find on the beach, they will eat. Later, of course, berries will come into the picture. Then, of course, later in the season, salmon will come into the picture. So, but right now, they're kind of foraging for whatever they can find on shore. And most of the bears you'll see here will probably be black bears. And, of course, you have brown bears as well. Brown bears would be similar to what we would call grizzly bears in the lower 48. A beautiful creature. Undomesticated, yes. You don't want to necessarily get encountered with the bears. The doors in Vancouver, they know how to open doors. Oh God, Jesus. Yeah, that's cell phones.
They do.
Yeah, bears are quite beautiful creatures as well. And clever. You know that a female bear gives birth in her sleep? Isn't that amazing? Yeah, smart. While she's sleeping, she's giving birth. She doesn't know she's giving birth. When she gets up about a month and a half later, the cubs are already ready to go. So, yeah, easy peasy. I would say, yeah, the question we're having is one of the most vicious bears. I would imagine bears in the wild, rural areas are probably more prone to attack as opposed to bears that are near populated areas where they're kind of used to seeing humans around. So, yeah, anytime you see baby bears or cubs, that often means that there's a big bear nearby. So, yeah, don't approach. Yeah, TMEC's cat, you go in the opposite direction. Well, the question is, what do you do if a bear charges you? They say go into a fetal position. Works for some bears, not necessarily all the time, but I guess the suggestion would be just to avoid that area. It would take me a while to get into a fetal position, so I know I'd be attacked right away. Yeah, oftentimes they say the make noise, play loud music, bells, something, and so they hear you, they go in the opposite direction. So now is a good opportunity on the starboard side in the trees. If you see any like what looks like white eggs in the tree, and the white eggs, of course, would be bald eagles. You'll see sitting on the tree. Bald eagles, the symbol of the USA. You know that Benjamin Franklin did not agree with the bald eagle being a symbol of the USA. He suggested the turkey. He didn't like the bald eagle. He said the bald eagle was a stealer or a cheat, wasn't a good bird to represent the U.S. And they decided to not do the turkey, but do the eagle instead. So imagine we could have been honoring the turkey and eating eagle on Thanksgiving. Yeah, you never know. Yeah, smart birds. Yeah, they have great vision. They can read a newspaper 100 yards away. They have good eyesight. Right. Yeah, so Ketchikan, of course, is famous for Creek Street. And Creek Street, of course, is the oldest part of Ketchikan. And a very lovely area, lots of history. During the salmon season, salmon will come up the Creek Street area. But salmon running this part of the year is much too early. Salmon will come up the rivers right on the end of July into August. Question I just had is a very good one. Ships, boats, do they hit wildlife? And they do. On the bridge, you'll find that most of the staff on the bridge are holding binoculars, and the mission is to look for wildlife. Because when a whale is sighted, they actually will steer the vessel away from these creatures. So the priority on the bridge, there are many priorities, but one of the leading priorities is to avoid wildlife at all costs. The last thing we want on news is a hunting ship hitting a whale. So they constantly watching out for wildlife in front of us. And on occasion they do get hit by ships. Which brings another question someone asked me yesterday, ship or boat? Definitely a ship. We're not a boat. A boat, a ship carries boats. So that's what we have alongside of us. So the correct description of us would be a ship, not a boat. They were coming up alongside the Ketchikan Airport. If you remember some years ago, they talked about the bridge to nowhere. To build a bridge. Currently, right now, if you fly into Ketchikan, you would have to take a ferry from the airport to the downtown Ketchikan area. So on the right-hand side, or the starboard side, would be where the airport is, and on the left-hand side, the port side, is where the population of Ketchikan resides. So the population of Ketchikan sits around 8,000. The greater Ketchikan area would be somewhere around 12,000. But in the immediate area, only about 8,000 people. The population rises, of course, in the summers as many people come here to work. I don't know if you've talked to your tour guides or talked to people in the shops. A lot of them are not from Alaska, they come from other parts of the world. And of course, Ketchikan is famous for misty fjords. I'm not sure if the misty fjords are operating, and they're famous for float planes. You can see fjords. That cruise line is usually Norwegian in that area right there. Could be Princess. I've seen there's two ships in there. We'll see when we get further down. Yeah, the ships that go in that area, if you look into the port side, there's ships in that corner right there. And there's a shuttle bus that takes it down into the Ketchikan area. So that's sort of the favorite place for cruise ships, but that is agreed upon with like Princess and Royal Caribbean that they park in this area here, and they leave the good parking stalls for Holland America, right? We're here first, right? Yeah, Holland America has been in Alaska for over 150 years. We're one of the very first cruise lines to come here. Yeah, those ships there looks like a Norwegian ship. So they're generally slightly larger than our ships. This Koningsdam is probably the largest Holland ship, if not the largest, in terms of passengers. So about, I think right now we have, 2,600 people on board. There's slightly over 1,000 crew members. Holland America kind of wants to keep it at that size. When you talk about cruise ships that hold 5,000, that's not the style of Holland America at all. That's a big ship. A floating city, yes. This is a floating city as it is, but yeah. Imagine, so we are 2,600 passengers. Imagine what 5,000 passengers must look like. Wow. Imagine how long it takes them to disembark and embark. A lot of people. Yeah, you have. Yeah, our smallest ships are the Zaandam and the Volendam. They hold about 1,400 passengers. Sharks, yeah, the question I had was sharks. Do they have sharks here? They do. The shark here that they have is called a salmon shark, and she is directly related to a great white shark. It's a smaller version of the great white, but salmon sharks are what they have here. Next to no reports of shark attacks, because as you can see, no one goes in the water here in Alaska, so. But they do have sharks here, yes.
Marco. What? That is funny though. Nice to meet you. That is funny though. What's that? Oh. Yeah, well, there, we can help you. Just missed the whale before we got up. Oh, did we? There was a tail. And a few minutes before we got here and it was heading that way. So what's that supposed to say? Oh, is that the cost? That's why I was trying to.
Yeah, we do have a pilot on board. Every port we have, there's a pilot that comes on board. We have a U.S. pilot currently on board. Tonight when we leave Ketchikan, we will head south. Probably about an hour after we leave Ketchikan, we'll enter Canadian waters, and at that point you'll notice that a small boat will come alongside of us, and we'll transfer. The American pilot will leave, and the Canadian pilot will come on board. But these pilots are almost required in most of our itineraries, and these pilots, of course, are locals who know the waters very well, and they're just brought on board for extra safety and extra guidance. But currently we have a U.S. pilot on board. He will disembark after we leave Ketchikan. We'll bring on the Canadian pilot, and the American pilot would then switch with the Canadian pilot. But we do have a pilot on board. And these pilots, of course, are allowed to guide us through these waters. Another question I had was, when is the best time to come to Alaska? And in terms of weather, it's pretty much like this all season long. It's hard to say I can't imagine a 7-day itinerary where it did not rain. I've been on one before, a couple, but in general, this is the kind of weather you'll get, just like this. This is very common. In fact, today's not bad at all. It's usually we can see in front of us. Some days are very foggy and very wet, and of course, we are in what is called often is the wettest city in Alaska. And why is it so wet? It's because of the weather systems that are out in the Pacific. So in the North Pacific, you have two major weather systems. One is known as the Alaska Current, and one is known as the California Current. The Alaska Current swirls further north counterclockwise, and the California Current swirls and it drags all that cold air down the coast. Along the North American coastline, you'll find some of the tallest coastal mountains in the world. Starting from Northern California, going all the way up towards Anchorage, you'll find that some of the tallest coastal mountains. These mountains are generally walls. And as these weather systems bring warm air off the Pacific, and these warm airs come towards North America, these mountains divert these warm airs. The warm air goes up into the atmosphere. When warm air and cool air meet, moisture builds, clouds begin to form, and what we see around us is the result of that. And as the clouds move further east, of course, they will drop the rain, and as they go over the mountains, they start to dissipate. And that's why oftentimes in the interior parts of British Columbia, like the interior parts of Washington and Oregon, you'll find arid conditions. Because by that point, the clouds have already been absorbed, and the moisture is gone, and all you have is arid conditions after that. But the weather systems, of course, are generated in the Pacific, and these mountains, of course, encourage the rain to exist. And the California Current, of course, swirls and it drags all that cold water all the way down towards Mexico. So sometimes in areas like Cabo San Lucas, beaches in Southern California, the water is very cold. That is because of that weather system, the California Current, which drags all that cold water south. The Alaska Current swirls counterclockwise. So these are two weather systems you'll find in the North Pacific that generate the weather that you'll find in the Pacific Northwest. And the weather in Ketchikan, they can get in the summer as hot as 90 degrees, and in the winter they can drop as low as 20 degrees, it depends. And these areas around us are temperate rainforests. Often when you hear the word rainforest, you think of tropical, but not necessarily. These are rainforests. Temperate rainforest. You can see signs of life. I can see a big sign that says Walmart. And on the right or the starboard side, you can see the Ketchikan Airport. They have daily flights that come up from either Vancouver or Seattle. Another question I had is the native village here again is Saxman's Native Village. They are part of the Tlingit people. So in Alaska, there's about 9 different indigenous cultures. Alaska natives, as they're called, sometimes unfortunately referred to as Eskimos, but they're not Eskimos. Not all Alaska natives are Eskimos. The Eskimos are the Alaska natives that live along the Bering Sea, the Yupiks, the Chupiks, the Inupiks, the Aleutiks. Those are technically Eskimos. The native people that live here would be the Tlingits, the Haidas, the Tsimshians, and the Ewaks. They're often referred to as Alaska natives. Then, of course, the interior parts of Alaska, those are generally Athabascan. So not all Alaska natives are referred to as Eskimos, only some. The Tlingits that you have here are referred to as Alaska natives, or they prefer to be referred to as Tlingits. And then further south you have Haida. And Haidas would run all the way through British Columbia, parts of northern Washington. And these people have been here for time immemorial, so they've been here well over 10,000 years. Alaska Natives. So you have Alaska Natives, Native Americans, and Native Hawaiians. Those are the 3 indigenous cultural groups in the United States. And in Canada, of course, they're referred to as First Nations. You can see the population of Ketchikan on the port side. What drives their economy would be fishing. It used to be fishing alongside lumbering, but most of the lumber mills are gone. Pulp mills are no longer in existence. Pulp mills are mostly you'll find in Asia. So a lot of times they take trees from the area, not just Alaska, but from British Columbia, and these trees are sent for processing in places like Asia. A lot of these mills, of course, especially where pulp is concerned, would deposit all kinds of toxins into Mother Nature. So a law was set, I think in 1974, a law banning these pulp mills from the coastline. But what drives their economy, of course, would be fishing and lumbering. And tourism, of course, plays a role. But tourism for Alaska would be seasonal, and their tourism season runs from September through October. But the majority of their tourism dollars come during the summer. And most of the visitors that come to Alaska come via cruise ships. So about 1.6 million visitors come here, and most of them come on cruise ships. So the glaciers you saw yesterday in beautiful Glacier Bay, of course, the main glacier was Marjorie. And of course, right alongside Marjorie was a Grand Pacific Glacier. And of course, we saw other glaciers like the Reed Glacier, Lamplugh Glacier. John Hopkins Glacier is unique in the sense that it's one of the few glaciers that's advancing. A lot of times people assume that all glaciers retreat because of global warming, and that's not true. Some glaciers are advancing, some are retreating, some are stable. The Marjorie Glacier is one that it is receding, but John Hopkins is one of the glaciers that is not, it's actually advancing. It really depends on the snowfall in the ice fields. Another one that's advancing quite quickly, I may add, would be the Mendenhall Glacier in June. Through the years, I've actually seen the difference between what I saw 18 years ago versus what I'm seeing today. But that glacier has a quite distinct retreat pattern. And glaciers are nothing but rivers of ice. You know, in the ice fields inland, it snows every day in some areas. As it snows, new snow falls on old snow. It compacts the old snow. The next day, new snow falls, pushes the old snow down. The next day, more snow. The next day, more snow. So all of that weight pushes and pushes and pushes and pushes. Therefore, the ice at the bottom, or the snow at the bottom, is no longer snow. It is actually ice, dense ice. And the friction of all that weight allows the ice to melt. And as it melts, it'll now be able to move. And with all that pressure pushing down, it has to escape. Same thing if you were to push your fist down into a peanut butter jar. As your fist would go into the peanut butter jar, your fist would replace peanut butter. Therefore, the peanut butter will look for an area to escape. That's why it would then ooze through your knuckles, eventually making over the top of the peanut butter jar. And the same thing that's happening in the ice fields. All that new snow is pushing. Eventually, the ice at the bottom, dense. It's almost like rock. And so dense that it squeezes the oxygen out of the ice. And so eventually it finds its way out. And when it does, it comes over the top, it flows. It moves like a river of ice, basically what glaciers are. And I mean dense ice. This is the kind of ice that so much pressure is pushed down, the oxygen has been pushed out. Imagine that ice under so much pressure that squeezes the oxygen out. And so this kind of dense ice that you'll find in the glaciers are the kind of ice you really want in your cooler because they'll last forever because it's so dense. And again, someone asked me about the blue ice. Why is it blue? It's blue because it is dense. And what happens is when the sun hits it, of course, light travels in a spectrum. And the spectrum of light goes into the ice. Eventually, it has to bounce back to come out. And as it goes in, but when it's time for it to bounce back out, the only wavelength that can come out, which is the smallest wavelength, would be the color blue, and that's what your eyes are seeing then. Everything else gets absorbed, but the wavelength that's blue is the one that can come out, and that's what your eyes are seeing. So that's why the ice is blue. Dense ice.
About biology questions, right? But if you really had the no, that's that I would have them and then on all of those, I will not solve you. Now you make two parentheses. Best. I will put one wondering where we're quite a narrow area. We're going through here and we're going to go over there. It's quite narrow.